I'm the Reverend Rachael Hayes. I use she, her pronouns. I am the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Society of Amherst. Welcome to you, old friends and new, young and old, costumed and in your everyday clothes, in the Zoom and in the sanctuary. You are an essential part of our celebration today. Whether today is your first or your 1000th Sunday in our midst, we are stronger because you are with us. We are one people of many beliefs, many origins, sexualities, and genders. We are all growing, all learning, all loved. Just as you are welcome here. Today, we're talking about our ancestors, the people whose lives made our lives possible. We'll add pictures and objects to our altar during the service and light candles in memory of our ancestors. If you're joining us on Zoom, you may wish to have a picture or object to hold in front of you or to share on camera, and you may wish to have a candle to light.
From the Reverend Karen G. Johnston. Ancestors who spoke with bravest fire, lend us your senses, that we may know another world is on her way, breathed into life with our participation in her creation. Forebears who led the way when there was at first no way, lend us your persistence, your temerity, your assurance that the moral arc of the universe does indeed bend toward justice. Ones who went before us, sacrificing for a future not your own. Help us to give of ourselves, that the common stones in our hands today might be the cathedrals of compassion tomorrow, the halls of restorative justice, sheltering walls of beloved community the day after. It is Sunday morning, the day we gather. Let us be thankful and full of praise to be in the company of those who came before, yet are ever in our midst.
I invite you to rise in body, in spirit, in all the ways we do, to sing our first hymn, which you may know if you were with us last week. It is My Roots Go Down, but we're singing a different verse this week. So everybody's learning at least part of it.
My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down. Little acorn, I am an acorn waiting to be born. I am an acorn waiting to be born. I am an acorn waiting to be born. My roots go down. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down. One more time. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down.
So I have a story and then a question. And my story today is about my grandfather. His name was Forrest Maynard Coate, and he was from Nampa, Idaho. At least that's where he ended up. My grandfather came from back east, as he always said, and to this day, I have absolutely no idea what state that might have been. Because all he ever said was back east. I was raised in Los Angeles, and somehow he made it out there. I know that my dad and his brothers and his sister were all born in California. And I know that my grandfather was not born in Idaho, but there was a farm in Idaho. And I just kind of gathered a lot of little trickles of information about my grandfather. He was already, as I saw it, old when I was born. And he really never seemed to age. He seemed to be about the same age my entire childhood and into my young adulthood. He was just my grampy. His name, like I said, was Forrest Maynard Coate. His father's name was Orville Forrest Coate. My father's name is Daniel Forrest Coate. And naturally, I named my son Julian Forrest. That was the thing that we chose to carry on, among many other things, was his name. Today we are talking about ancestors. So does anyone up front if you like, know what an ancestor is? I'll let all of you answer.
An ancestor is people in your family who came before you.
People in your family who came before you? Anyone else?
An ancestor is someone who lived before you, and sometimes they pass down things like special things that were special to them.
So exactly right. Ancestors can be members of your family or members of a community that is special to you. They don't necessarily have to be family. That is often how we talk about them. So today we are going to be talking about all things ancestors, people who passed things down to us, whether people in our family or in our community. We have ancestors in this church who passed this church down to us, along with traditions and rituals. So we have all of these different kinds of ancestors, and among that, we are also going to be talking about how we honor ancestors today, whether that's some kind of All Saints or All Souls Day, whether that's a special celebration for Samhain, whether that is a holiday that they especially loved, or whether that is something that we do maybe on Halloween. We'll also have plenty of time to talk about Halloween and our costumes. So now we are going to do a little ancestors ritual. So I'm going to invite the children to go with their families in case their families brought something with them.
Presented on our altar in name, in picture, in object, in our digital sphere, left behind a legacy, a lesson, work to do, love to carry forward. They are ancestors of body and ancestors of spirit, those who made our lives possible in one way or another. Ancestors, those we know by name and those we know only in the shapes of our faces, those whose voices we remember and those whose words we go back and read, those who held us in their arms, our parents or our grandparents or more, and those who created a world for us to grow into. Ancestors, we would not be here without you. We thank you. We remember that we are part of a story that is longer than our own lives. We invite the memory of our ancestors to lead us into courage, liberation, joy, and justice. As we are connected to the past through our ancestors, we remember that we are moving into a future we will create together, that we will be ancestors too. We thank you. ancestors. I will share with you two poems from Atina O. Danner in her book, Incantations for Rest, Poems, Meditations, and Other Magic. Atina Danner is a Black Unitarian Universalist organizer, writer, and has published this beautiful book that I am very excited about. And she has wonderful things to say about ancestors. This one is called Storyteller's Invocation. Honor our ancestors, stories tucked into our hearts. Bless the stories reaching back to when the word began. Blessings to my siblings as we break the word apart. Touch the soul inside of it and build the word again.
Good morning. My name is Ann Moore, and I'm here today to talk about an ancestor named Barbara Gettings, who was a gay rights activist and pioneer. For the past 25 years, I've been involved as a librarian in the oldest professional LGBTQ group in the United States. And early in my leadership of this group, I met Barbara. Today, this group is known as the Rainbow Roundtable of the American Library Association. Gettings led the group from 1971 until 1986, taking over just months after the group was founded, when the young librarian founders were struggling to develop the group's purpose and mission, while also seeking full-time jobs that would not have endorsed this activism. One of the remarkable things about this long leadership tenure is that Barbara was not a librarian and never worked in a library. She identified as gay. She understood the power of books and libraries to shape culture. She was a serious activist, willing to do the often thankless and tedious work needed to create and sustain an organization. And she was brave enough to be out publicly at a time when it was illegal, immoral, and considered illegal, immoral, and profoundly unsafe. When she was first labeled as a homosexual, she was unable to find any books in libraries that presented a positive image of gays and lesbians. She made it her self-described life mission to tear away the shroud of invisibility related to homosexuality. As coordinator of the American Library Association's Gay Task Force and the Task Force on Gay Liberation, she published the first gay bibliographies and established what is today the Stonewall Book Awards. These awards, which will be named in 2 months for the 53rd year, now consist of a literature award named after Gettings, a nonfiction award named after founder Israel Fishman, and as of this year, a new poetry award, as well as a young adult and children's awards that are part of the prestigious ALA Youth Media Awards that include the Caldecott and Newbery Awards. At the same time Gettings was working as part of the American Library Association group, she was also working with activist Frank Kameny to pressure the American Psychiatric Association to update what is called the DSM and remove homosexuality as a mental illness. When the APA agreed to this change in 1973, prominent newspapers ran headlines like 20 million homosexuals gain instant cure. Barbara and her longtime partner Kayla Hughes documented the gay liberation movement by keeping copies of every newsletter, bibliography, newspaper article, and political placard, knowing this movement mattered and its history would be worth preserving. This collection is now housed in the archives of the New York Public Library with over 2,000 of Kay's photographs digitized. Barbara's activism is important on so many levels. On a personal level, she and other activists made it possible for my generation to live open lives. On an institutional level, LGBTQ people are represented in libraries. Queer and trans and questioning kids can identify with characters in books. Barbara's work with Frank Kameny helped protect queer people from being fired just for being gay or from being institutionalized and considered mentally ill. Today, there is increasing backlash. LGBTQ books are the most challenged and banned category of books, and public libraries across the country face protests over drag queen story hours. Gender-affirming programs and medical care is being attacked as reproductive justice loses ground across the country. My neighbor's grandchild in Indiana, who is questioning their gender identity, is living in a state where laws have just been enacted that not only ban abortion, but also gender-affirming health care and programs. There is still much work to be done, but I'm proud of my ancestor, Barbara Gettings, and grateful to ancestors like her who saw the possibilities and organized even when change seemed impossible. Thank you.
One more from Atina Danner. Ancestors of the page and the call. Elders of the message. Not quiet, not easy, not waiting another moment. Intozake, Tony, Octavia, Polly, Zora, June, Gwendolyn. My mother, not an ancestor, but a lit fuse. To my ancestors and elders, I honor you all. My mother spoke to me in your language so I would be ready for this religion. I take up the mantle and bear the reverberations, the power. It shakes me. I plant my feet. Intozake did not come for your comfort, none of y'all. Mother Morrison did not come to suffer fools. Octavia E. has an omen for you. Did you think Reverend Dr. Murray would let you off the hook? Zora gave less of what the world wanted and more of what we needed. What needed to be said, June said it plain and simply undeniable. Gwendolyn's quiet pace dogs your steps and keeps coming and coming and coming. The moment I touch the page, I'm howling the through line, tasting the blood and joy. Last winter and spring, I met monthly on Zoom with a group from our congregation to discuss the book, What Kind of Ancestor Do You Want to Be? Much of the book had to do with our relationship to the land, but the conversations we had moved into many different ways of understanding this idea of ancestry. We spoke of our own family trees and shared amazing old pictures with one another. We talked about what it would mean for us to have descendants, some of us with children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, some of us with descendants outside of our bodily lineage. We talked about how our ancestors taught us to mourn them after they were gone. By the end, each of us had an idea of what kind of ancestor we wanted to be in the future once our own living days were done. And I won't speak for the whole group, but I felt a deep compassion for these ancestors I have, who left us with this world that is both a blessing and a mess. Some of my ancestors of body, the ones I know or the ones still in living memory, they weren't all good. Maybe you can relate. Most of us aren't all good, of course, and in them it's true too. They don't get any do-overs on life, and they're stuck with who they were before they died. Regular, complicated humans who loved imperfectly and didn't always leave the world better than they found it. But they still have something to teach me. In our Covenant for the Ancestors group, we held this idea. All ancestors have something to teach us. Some ancestors bring wisdom from our lives. Some invite us to find wisdom as we wrestle with their lives. Most had lives that helped and harmed. In 2017, I participated in a racial justice training sponsored by the UU College of Social Justice. And I got to meet several movement elders from the larger Unitarian Universalist community, and specifically those in the South, since this training was in New Orleans. I met a woman who looked so much like my grandfather that I had a hard time believing that she wasn't some kind of kin to me. And she wasn't. We have the look of a lot of people from an early wave of Scots-Irish migration to this continent who wound up in the Mid-South, and I suspect she did too, and that's as close of kin as we are. We weren't related, but suddenly I no longer felt like I was the first person in my family line to do deep work in changing our relationship to racism. Whether I knew the stories or not, I was no longer alone because I could envision an ancestor. At that same training, Caitlin Breedlove led a circle where each of us was invited to answer this question. Who is your mama's mama, and where did she live? Caitlin learned this question while working with Southerners on new ground, where many workshops had started, everyone bringing their mama's mama and her story into our shared space. And movement organizers use these lineages to connect us to each other, not just the past. Movement ancestors can be just as meaningful as personal bodily ancestors. Anne's reflection on Barbara Giddings is proof of that. Many of us look to the ancestors to help us remember a better world is possible. And that is compelling when we are living in the better world that they had a part in building. It's hard to imagine the imperfect but still beautiful queer liberation happening around us now without ancestors like Barbara. Cultural ancestors can also be part of placing oneself in the history of the world, like all the Black women and femme thinkers and writers in Atina Danner's poem. These writers help us understand the world and imagine a better one. And of course, cultural practices of acknowledging ancestors help us do this too. All Souls Day in a Christian context, Dia de los Muertos in a Mexican context, Dia de los Difuntos in a Salvadoran context, and not a holiday, but a celebration nonetheless. Bridge for Unity is having a commemoration of African ancestors right here in our sanctuary next Sunday afternoon, followed by an intergroup dialogue process about reparations in our town. I am so excited that we get to host this event. You are welcome to come and participate. Let me know if you didn't get the announcement in your emails, and you can talk to Ellen if you're excited about it. She'll be here too. All ancestors have a lesson to contribute. All ancestors have something to teach us. Some ancestors bring wisdom from their lives. Some invite us to find wisdom as we wrestle with their lives. Most had lives that helped and harmed. As I began to learn about race in my life, as I learned about my whiteness and what that whiteness meant for my ancestors, I found it hard to trust my white ancestors. Looking for anti-racist white ancestors outside my bodily line, I opened up my idea of what was possible. Looking back to who I suspected my bodily ancestors to be, I found a lot of work to do, so much of it having to do with race. People who sided with white wealth against their neighbors of color in the hopes that they would get ahead too. The work in my lifetime is to build relationships with people of color that erase inequalities. And I will not complete this work in my life. In acknowledging our ancestors, we remember that we have come from somewhere, that our story starts before us and will go beyond us, that we will leave work for those who will come behind and carry it the next part of the way. All of us will die. It is a fact and a blessing of being human to be aware that each of us will die. None will live forever. We each get our unknown number of days to be part of the love, joy, struggle, and gift that is this human existence. Each of us has the opportunity to take the lessons of our ancestors and build a world of more kindness, love, and justice. Each of us has the chance to become the kind of ancestors people look to rather than overcome. Each of us will die, as all of our ancestors have died. Our descendants, as long as human beings continue to live, will continue on. May this chain bring more love into the world. Spirit of life and death, love that connects us to our ancestors, we arrive at this moment holding our personal losses, those we love to have died. We remember that 1 million people in this country, more than 6.5 million worldwide, have died of COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic. We remember those who have died of violence, including hate crimes of racism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, anti-Semitism, xenophobia. We remember those, soldier and civilian, who have died in war or years later as a result of war. We remember those who have died in climate disasters. We remember that each one of these lives, known to us or not, is worthy of love. We also hold other sorrows, those personal to us and those shared among our human family. And as always, we know that this life is full of the joys that lie side by side with deaths and other sorrows. The sweet connections, the milestones, the triumphs that tie us together. I invite you into a moment of silence. When the music begins, I invite you forward to light a candle for your joy, sorrow, ancestor, or loved one. Blessed be. Amen. I invite you to rise and place your hands over your heart or reach out for the hand of the person beside you as we sing our closing song.
Name.